Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. When we recessed on yesterday, we were still in the defense portion of the evidence. Defense have additional witnesses to present.
Yes, Your Honor. Defense was called Billy Little.
All right.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Amen.
Good morning, Mr. Little.
Good morning.
Would you please state your full name and spell your last, please?
Billy Little, L-I-T-T-L-E.
Okay, Mr. Little, there's a microphone right there. And if you'll swing that to you guys so we can hear you a little bit better. First time you ever testified in court?
Yes.
Is that microphone on? Could you?
Believe it is.
Okay, now I can hear you. Mr. Little, where do you reside?
I live in Cypress, Texas, which is northwest of Houston.
Okay, and what is it that you do for a living, sir?
I'm a software engineer for Hewlett-Packard.
Okay, and how long have you been employed with Hewlett-Packard?
14 years.
Okay. And what sort of, you said you're a software engineer, what sort of things do you work on at Hewlett-Packard?
Our division writes what is termed enterprise products. So these are products that are not purchased for use for home use, but they're for government entities, banks, any system that can never stop no matter what. So that is the product line both in hardware and software that I deal with.
Okay. And in your, while you've been working at Hewlett-Packard, did you have occasion to meet or have contact with an individual by the name of Brandon Daniel?
I did.
Okay. And you've met Brandon, I know you live in Houston and he was in Austin. You've met Brandon, no face-to-face?
Yes.
Prior to his incarceration?
Yes.
Okay. Can you, do you see him in the courtroom today? Can you identify him?
I do.
Okay. Where is he?
He is sitting to your right.
Okay, great. Now, how is it that you came into contact with Brandon?
In April of 2011, the project that I was working on was winding down and the company needed assistance with a new product that they were coming out with. And the portion that they needed help with was primarily being developed in our facility in Austin. The company typically does not ever move people toward the project. They just bring pieces of the project to the facility where the employee already is. So several of us in Houston were added to the project even though we didn't live in Austin. So that's where we started. So in order to get started, we made a few trips driving from Houston to Austin facility to have meetings and get to know each other and discuss what our each responsibility was going to be.
Okay. And in one of those business trips, that's how you met Brandon Daniel?
Yes.
Okay.
One of the first business trip that we took was specifically to meet the other members of the team.
Okay. With regard, you said there were several members of your team and the team here in Austin, correct?
That's correct.
All right. Did you have direct contact with Brandon? Was he the person you most met with, or was it occasional? How was that?
As it turned out, it ended up working that way simply because of the technology we were using. The original project, my manager, when I joined the team, was based in Austin, so most of the original contact I had was of course, with my manager. But as the project progressed rapidly, I soon found out that in order to contribute like the company wanted, I was going to need some more help. The technology that the project used was new to me, even after 15 years with them and then another 15 with Raytheon. I was unfamiliar with the tools. And so, given the schedules that we had, I needed some help. And so it ended up more often that I would be turning to Brandon to explain to me why things worked the way they did, where things should be done, the work that I was responsible with, how did it fit in. So he ended up often being the person that I would contact on day-to-day basis.
Okay, so Brandon is quite a few years younger than you,
Yes.
is that correct? All right. But even being quite a few years younger than you, he was the one kind of catching you up on the project?
Yes, it is not uncommon in, of course, the computer industry for technologies to only last a few years and then something new come out. And so it just happens that it depends on what project you have at the time, what skill set that you've happened to develop. And at this time, it turned out that Brandon was obviously one of the 2 or 3 people that was the most adept at the new technology.
Okay. And with regard to after you had begun regular contact with Brandon with regard to the project, how frequent would your contact be with him?
So at first, it was either every day via email or instant message. As we diverged into different areas, it ended up a couple of times a week. And then certainly we had, with the way the management was set up at the time, for quite a while, we would have daily meetings via telecom, where everybody would talk about what they did that day or what they planned to do. And so we would often have a conversation every day for quite some time.
Okay. And during the time that you got to know Brandon in a professional capacity, even though you were in Houston and he was in Austin, did you become familiar with the quality of his work?
Yes. Being in this industry for as many years as I've had, both in management and as an engineer, you can tell pretty much quickly whether somebody is gifted at the craft of software and if they really enjoy what they're doing, as opposed to just picking up a paycheck. And you can tell this by the quality and the quantity of their work compared to their peers on the same team. I've got a pretty good eye for what is going to work and what is not, and what is going to be expensive to maintain and what's not.
And what was your assessment of Brandon's doing?
So we, early on in the project, had several problems to overcome, and Brandon would most often be the one that would be the first to tackle that problem in a manner that allowed everyone else to leverage that effort in order to lower the amount of work that they would have to do. It's difficult to describe, but it's like writing a chapter in a book for someone else and that chapter fitting perfectly with the book that you're writing.
So let me fast forward a little bit, okay? When was it that you learned that Brandon had been arrested for killing a police officer?
That, I believe, was so the company sent out an email from my vice president to all of us that was directly on his team at the time, notifying us of the incident. That must have been around 8:30 on a Friday morning, as I recall. And it had a couple of guidelines that the company wanted followed in case we were contacted by the media, and other than that, that was all that the company had said. But that's how I found out.
Okay. And what did you think when you found out?
It was odd. That would be the last thing I would have imagined to see. It so stunned me that I had to sit there and just stare at the email and to make sure that, this wasn't some sort of hoax from somebody within the company making a joke. But it was authentic as far as the email was when I checked. So I was stunned.
Okay. So to be fair, you were in Houston and Brandon was here. You didn't have any idea about his drug use
No, not at all. Every time that I've talked to him on the phone, and for, our conversations would last approximately 30 minutes or more, and they were always of a technical nature, rarely of a personal nature at the time. There was no indication that I ever got that he had been in or under the influence of anything.
Did you know about his previous arrests for things or run-ins with the law?
No, I had no idea.
So, in all fairness, at that time, you didn't have necessarily a personal relationship with Brandon?
No.
Okay. And after he was arrested, did that change?
Yes, it did.
Okay. How so?
So, as a result of being so stunned in that, and having, thought about our relationship and how effective he had been as a contributor to the team, it seemed to me that this was someone that I wanted to reach out to in a personal way, based on what I believe in my heart to be the thing that my Lord would most want me to do. I visited him in prison, as I felt I was commanded to do, and so I did. And that's how we began to just, have a conversation over the next few months.
So, if I'm characterizing it correctly, you felt, based on your personal faith, that you should reach out to him and minister to him?
Yes, I did.
The proper terminology?
Yes.
Okay.
In my own family, we had difficult areas in my relatives' areas. And so I just felt burdened for him in a similar way. And I wanted to reach out and see, if there was something that I could do to meet an eternal need, seeing how his temporal options were quite limited at the time.
Okay. And so, with regard to that and those efforts, how many times have you come to see him in Austin?
Probably been around at least 4.
Okay. And each time you've had visits with him through, I guess, telecom?
Through the telecom, yes.
And
The first one was in person through a glass, and then after that, they were all through a video conference phone at the Valley facility.
was it just you to come visit with him, or somebody else come?
My wife always came with me.
Okay. Did you begin a correspondence with Brandon with regard to some of the things you were talking about?
Yes, my wife and I both did.
Okay. And was Brandon, has he been always receptive to the idea of religion or what you're talking about?
The first couple of meetings, we didn't broach the subject too much. For the most part, I wanted to impress upon him, that he had a friend, and that was concerned for him and for the situation that he was in. But we did share with him our faith and some items that we thought would be helpful to him in dealing with the day-to-day situation that he was in. So I wrote him, and my wife wrote him separately as well.
So is it, and he wrote you at least one time, is that correct?
That's correct.
And is it fair to say that he was skeptical or no?
I would not characterize it as skeptical. He seemed to be someone who was searching for something and was smart enough to know that he hadn't found it. And the fact that he didn't tell us to leave him alone or that he was uninterested, we felt to be a positive position.
But he didn't write you in a letter and say, oh, I've had some jailhouse conversion.
No, not at all.
May I approach your Honor?
Yes.
Mr. Little, I'm going to show you what's been previously marked as Defense Exhibit 17. Do you recognize that?
I do.
What is that?
That is a letter, the only letter that we have received that Brandon wrote, my wife and I.
Okay. And this is the original copy of the letter, is that, or the original letter, correct?
It is.
Okay, but attached to the letter is a photo copy of a drawing that accompanied the letter?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, you still have the original drawing?
We have the original. My wife appreciated it. She put it in a small frame and placed it on the desk in her office.
Okay, and this is a copy of that?
That is a copy.
Okay, but, and the only reason that you don't have it is because it's
It's
framed
framed.
at home? Okay. All right. Are we asked to admit Defense Exhibit 17?
I have no objection.
Now, in one portion of the letter, Mr. Daniel sort of questions religion a little bit, correct?
Yes, I believe, as I recall.
Yes. Commissioner Publisher, I approach the screen here, you're up. Now, Mr. Little, if I could show you the screen here, and what's on this letter, is Mr. Daniel says to you that one thing that raises doubts for me is how people tend to become more religious in desperate situations. Here in jail, for example, many people become religious. It leads me to believe it is a framework for hope, which is great, but maybe nothing more. Scientists, in contrast, whom I tend to relate to more, seem to disregard the idea of religion. So there, he's expressing a little
Oh, yeah.
skepticism. Would you agree?
Yes,
But
which
that
is
did-
not uncommon.
Right. That doesn't dissuade you from still trying to minister,
Not at all.
does it? Not if you're determined still?
Oh, yeah.
And then he says to you, if it is true, however, I am worried. Why would God forgive me when my crime is so terrible? So
That's a very common question.
he goes on to tell you about a book he read in high school called Dante's Inferno. Are you familiar with that book?
I've read that, yes.
Okay. And he says he read it in high school. According to Dante's Inferno, the book I read in high school, I will be banished to the lowest circle of hell, save the circle for betrayers. Here I will be frozen from the waist down, and my victim will feast on my brains for eternity. And he says here, it seems hopeless. It seems like I am doomed. Is that the content of that letter?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And do you believe that Brandon, at least how you're reaching out to him, is beyond help or redemption?
No one is.
And you're not testifying today to try to somehow excuse or absolve Brandon for what he did.
Not at all. What I've done is irrelevant to that.
Okay. And how would you describe your goal for your relationship with Brandon?
For a man who has very few choices here, his choices for eternity are the same as you and I. And so that's my goal, is to make him aware of those choices.
And are you, if I asked you, I think, are you dissuaded by his skepticism?
No, not at all.
Why not?
Because all of us were skeptics. I certainly was when I was 16 or 17. But until I would be told, I look at it as a positive that I was not told that he's not interested, leave him alone. And so barring that, I'm dissuaded.
So it's safe to say that at least for you, Brandon is a work in progress?
All of us are, but yes, certainly for Brandon.
And just briefly, this is the ship that came with it, is that correct?
That's correct.
Pass the witness, Your Honor.
Mr. Little, did Mr. Daniel ever describe to you what happened on April 6, 2012?
Not at all.
Did you ever ask?
Nope.
And so your testimony here today is basically to testify that you have faith that he can be saved. Is that fair to say?
What I'm to testify is that it is my responsibility to present to him the gospel, nothing more.
And whether he accepts it or not is up to him completely.
That is correct.
And directing your attention to that, the letter, I don't remember the number, but the letter you received from Mr. Daniel, does he at any point in that letter describe any remorse or sympathy for the victim in this cause, or the victim's family?
I must admit that I haven't read the letter in quite a while, so I don't recall, but I just do not recall what he, if he mentions that at all.
I have no further questions.
Nothing further. Melissa, could you excuse her?
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Yes.
Fifth will call Sherry Shook.
You do solemnly swear the testimony which you will not give opinion before this court should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Proceed, Your Honor. Good morning, Ms. Shook. Would you please state your name and spell your last for the record, please?
My name is Sherry Shook, S-C-H-U-C-K.
Okay. And Ms. Shook, how are you related, or are you related to Brandon?
I am.
How are you related to Brandon?
He is my nephew.
Okay, and you see him obviously in the courtroom then.
I do.
Okay. Now, Ms. Shook, where do you reside in Louisville?
I live in the state of Kansas.
Okay. And where exactly in Kansas?
I live in a small town called Wamego. It's, if anyone's familiar with Kansas, it's near Manhattan in the Kansas State University.
Okay. And what county in Kansas is that?
Pottawatomie County.
Okay. And how are you currently employed?
I am the Pottawatomie County Attorney.
Okay. And when we say county attorney, is in Travis County we have a county attorney and a district attorney. Are there two separate offices? Is there a distinction in Kansas?
There is not. In Kansas, a county attorney is the same as a district attorney. They're an elected office, so we run for office every 4 years. I'm charged with prosecuting any felonies that occur in the county, as well as any juvenile cases, caring treatments, those type of things.
Okay. And so essentially you do what these two gentlemen do it too.
Yes.
Now I know it might be strange for you. I went to law school in Kansas as well, so I know it's strange for you to see us sitting at the table here, because in Kansas you stand at a podium or somewhere else.
Yes.
In the courtroom. Okay. It's just the custom, by the way. It's not trying to be rude to you that we have here in
Oh, that's
Texas.
fine.
All right. Now, before you were a district attorney or before you were an attorney, what did you do for a living?
I was a law enforcement officer.
Okay. And were you a patrol officer?
I was both. I started off obviously in patrol, and then I was a detective for several years before I went to law school.
Okay. And are you married?
I am.
What is your husband's name?
My husband's name is Bill, and he is a retired law enforcement officer as well. Just retired in September of last year.
So just this last year?
Yes.
So, and he's a detective as well?
Bill spent 14 years as a detective, and he did end his law enforcement career back on the road as a patrol officer. So he was almost 30 years.
Okay. Now, obviously then you've known Brandon his whole life.
Yes.
Now, you lived in Kansas and he lived in Colorado. How frequent was your contact with him when he was growing up?
Actually, when Brandon was born, they lived in Kansas. My sister did not leave until Brandon was probably about 5 or 6, moved out to California, and I actually followed them out there shortly afterwards. So probably for the first 6, 7 years of Brandon's life, I was always there. And then they moved to Colorado, and of course I'd see him on holidays, and probably till he was about 10 or 11, and he'd come visit. His dad also is from Kansas, and his aunts lived in Junction City, which was close by, so he had cousins there. And he stayed with us for, I think, 1 week during the summer. After that, as he got a little older, I would see him probably on holidays, or you'd send cards, things like that.
Okay. Now, if I could fast forward a little bit, did there come a time when Brandon was a teenager that he resided with you?
Yes,
And where did he reside with you?
in Wamego.
Okay. And for how long did he reside with you?
Probably only about a couple of months.
Okay. And did he attend school there, work, or anything like that?
He did. He went to Wamego High School. I enrolled him, I think, in January, and he actually did end up working at the local McDonald's. Wamego's not a very big town, but there is a McDonald's there, and he got a job there after probably about a month. So he did both, went to school and worked.
Okay. And how old was he at this time?
How old?
Yes.
I'd say 15, 16 years old, maybe.
Can you tell me what he was like when he lived with you? What was his demeanor and mental state and such?
Well, when he first came, I think he was fine. I mean, Brandon's always been pretty quiet. He's a quiet kid. Both of his parents are pretty introverted people. So that wasn't unexpected. But Brandon, always polite, always fairly happy. But the longer he was there, he seemed really sad. I thought he was just really homesick. He would stay in his room, and he would talk to you if you engaged him, but he just didn't engage you unless you went to him. So,
Did that trouble you a little bit?
yes,
Okay. Did he ever confide to you about his home life while he was with you or anything like that?
no,
So, in terms of if he was having any troubles or something, he didn't say anything like that to you?
no.
Now, while he was with you, do you remember him, ever doing drugs or drinking alcohol around you?
He did not while he was there. I know my sister had told me that there had been some issues about smoking dope, so when I asked her if he could just stay at our house, if he could just stay there, I did sit down with Brandon and I told him, you can't smoke dope here. You can't drink here, because this is what I do for a living. This is what your uncle does for a living. So,
Just a second. You said you can't drink here.
yes.
Did his mother relate to you that she had allowed him to drink alcohol?
Yes, you know, Mary said, you know, certainly they didn't belly up to the bar, those were her words, but in talking with Brandon, I didn't get that feeling. He seemed to believe that he could drink whenever he wanted to drink, and that's why I told him. Because when I said you couldn't drink here, he goes, well, Mom lets me drink at home. And I said, I understand that, but you can't drink here because this is what we do for a living, and it's never going to look good, et cetera, et cetera. So that was my first issue with it.
Did that concern you, your sister's attitude toward, you know, kind of laissez-faire attitude towards drinking and smoking?
I was not surprised about the smoking.
Why not?
My sister has always been very liberal about marijuana use. In fact, I think, I sometimes think that's why she moved to Colorado, because there she would tell me everyone has a very liberal idea of it. No one thinks it's a big deal here. And I said, well, it is a big deal because it's illegal. And drinking, she's never been a big drinker. And I don't think that she really even likes to drink. So when she would talk about Brand doing that, it was more, she didn't approve of it, but she didn't, her words were, Brandon is old enough to make those decisions. He's an adult, he can make that decision whether he's going to drink or not.
At 15, she said that?
Yes.
And what about his father? Do you know his father to be a drinker?
Ken, not really. I mean, I know he does drink, but I never knew him to be a huge drinker.
Now, with regard to his stay with you, you said that you had a conversation about drinking, but did he ever do it anyway, or do you remember that at all?
He did, not outside of the house. We used to keep just little bottles of schnapps, I think, or my dad used to call them $1 a swallow. They were just those little bitty bottle things. And we would have some in the refrigerator. And I did notice that they were disappearing. And so I had asked my husband, I said, did you get thirsty or something? I was joking about it. He said, no. He goes, I thought maybe you had. And so I did ask Brandon if he had taken those, to which he said he had.
Okay. Can you elaborate a little bit on your family? In other words, where are you in thinking where are the children? How many children are in your family?
There are 4 of us. I have an older brother. Brandon's mom is my older sister. And then we have a younger brother.
Okay, so you're the third of 4 children.
Yes.
Okay. And with regard to your sister's family, do you know much about their family dynamic?
I don't. I know that, you know, Mara always treated and expected Brandon to be an adult. In her eyes, he has always been the one to make the decision about what he is ultimately going to do, even though he was just a kid. So he was expected to always act like an adult. Samantha, his sister, came along when he was a little bit older, and they were treated really very differently, in my opinion. And yeah, so those were the kind of dynamics I saw.
Now, you obviously kept close attention to the case since it started, right?
Yes, when I found out about it, yes.
Okay. How was it that you found out about it?
I received a call from a detective Fugit, I think that's his name, at my office. I think shortly after the incident occurred in April of, I think, 2012.
Okay.
So
And he told you directly what?
he told me that he was investigating the homicide of an Austin police officer. I thought maybe the defendant had ties to Kansas. And the more he talked, the more I realized he was talking about Brandon. So I asked him if Brandon was a witness and maybe he was in hiding. That's what I thought. And he said that he had arrested him. Sorry, I didn't know. That was the first time that I found out. So after that, I called my sister, and she had not been talking to me. She had not talked to me for over a year by that time. And she didn't talk to me then either. She wouldn't talk to me about this for probably about 6 more months.
Is it fair to characterize your relationship with your sister as estranged or strained?
Yes?
Okay. I don't suppose this situation has done much to help that?
No.
Do you know whether she sort of sees you as just part of the system and prosecuting her son or anything like that? Or how would you describe her attitude towards you about it?
You know, initially when she asked me to come into this, it was more for Brandon's sake. He was very depressed. He was asking for me. I think he just felt safer. So I came in for Brandon's sake. And for a little bit, our relationship, mine and my sister's, was on a more even keel. She was more friendly, I should say. But I can tell you probably about within the last couple of months, it's disintegrated. And yes, she does see me as a sellout because of my profession, because I used to be a police officer. She thinks that somehow I don't love my nephew enough because of that. So.
Now, while this case has been going on 2 years, have you learned that your sister was advised to get Brandon some psychiatric evaluation or care?
Yes.
And you also knew that she refused. Did you know that?
Yes.
Did that surprise you?
It does not surprise me that she refused in light of the things I know now. No.
Why not?
My sister is a very closed person. She won't even tell us. She's moved several times. We don't have addresses. We'll send a card, then it'll come back. So for her to actually talk to somebody or have a family member talk to somebody who might tell her this is a better course to do something, this is a better way you might approach something, would be unheard of.
So, how much contact have you had with Brandon since he was 16 and not living with you?
After Bran went back home, my sister and I were still on fairly decent terms. I did come out there to Colorado after he had left, so I got to see him then, and he would still have been a teenager, maybe about 17. And then I came out another time, and he was just almost 21. I think that's when I met Jenna. He had been seeing her, and so that was a good visit.
Okay. You say you met Jenna Phelan?
Yes, I think that's her last name.
Okay. And when you met Jenna and you saw her together with Brandon, what did you think? How did you think Brandon was? Was he sad, happy, or what was?
Actually, he seemed really pretty happy. It was obviously Jenna really just adored him. And we were there that night, and my dad came with us, so we just sat around playing cards and having a few drinks, and he and Jenna were giggling the whole night and always right next to each other, touching each other. So just a nice night. She was a sweet kid, I thought.
What was your sister's Mary's reaction to Jenna?
Mary didn't, I don't know if she disliked Jenna, she just didn't approve of Jenna. She didn't think Jenna was up to a standard that Brandon should be seeing. She was too loud, she wasn't smart enough, that type of thing. When I commented that she seemed to really make him happy, and he seemed to be happy, he said, well, that's not everything. It's about having an equal to you. That was her opinion of it.
So it's not that she didn't disapprove, that she disapproved of the relationship, she just didn't particularly like it.
Right.
Ms. Schick, have you visited Brandon since you've been here?
Yes.
How many times did you say?
I've come down twice. Believe so. Yes. Well, this will be my third time here, I believe.
And you haven't had an opportunity to visit him this time around, obviously.
I got in last night, and unfortunately, I will be leaving right afterwards, yes.
Tell me what you feel about the situation.
I know that you have to make a decision based on an event. And I've known Brandon for longer than that event. There's nothing ever that would have made me think he could do something like that. I sit here and I still can't believe we are all here. And in light of the things that I have found out, I feel very guilty that I sent him home and I didn't keep him with me. So I think that I could have, and it would never have happened. That's how I feel.
Or we'll pass the witness.
Sure.